Well, good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet and innovate today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging in the room as well. It's really important that we start there on today, because I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and tell you about my story. But if I tell you right now that I'm the founder and CEO of LiteHaus International, and we've supported 50 to 100,000 students get access to digital learning opportunities, you're already bored. Okay? Instead, we're going to go back to where I was from, because that's one thing that all of us here share in common. Hands up, who's been in Townsville for longer than 3 years? Who grew up here? Okay, any guesses where I grew up? There you go. So I grew up in Walgaroo. I was 6 years of age when Dad and I and the family moved up here. And the reason I want to start there is because today we're going to think big, we're going to talk big, we're going to have all these crazy visions for the future, but that's less important. It's about where you're from, first of all. And you're only going to appreciate my idea if I tell you where it came from. So I went to Moneyborough State School. Hands up who went to Moneyborough State School. Excellent, fantastic. And then after that, I went to Townsville Grammar School as well. Don't judge me for that. That was Mum and Dad's decision. And then after that, I found my way to JCU. So at 16, I graduated and came here. And what a fantastic place this is as well. Now, I entered university at 16, and so I was pretty young. And there were a lot of things that I did well in the classroom. But then as you get older and you start, experiencing adulthood and all the things that come with that, my GPA sort of went down. I got a bit distracted by all the lovely things that are out there when you turn 18. And by the time I was 19, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at all. I was sort of a bit lost. I was doing a degree which, I wasn't exactly enjoying. And I had an opportunity that just came into my inbox one day. So the first lesson for today is always, and I'm still trying to tell my partner this, always check your emails, because that's where opportunities land. So in my email inbox, there was an email from Professor David King, who still teaches here today. And it said, in typical David Blunt fashion, "Do you want to do fieldwork in PNG?" ? I didn't even know anything about PNG, and I sure didn't know much about fieldwork either. But I said, yes, why not? What have I got to lose? And so I ended up getting a fully funded trip to PNG, where I got to meet someone very, very special who's here today, my good friend, Councillor Peter Rhyme. Now, Peter's from a very remote part of Papua New Guinea, which is one of the least developed countries in the world. So they face a lot of challenges. But while I was there, I fell in love with their spirit of improvement, self-improvement, development, and entrepreneurialism. Because most people in PNG, including Peter himself, are entrepreneurs. They grow their own food in their front yard, and they actually sell that. So while I was there, I fell in love with the community, and I promised to come back again and do my honours thesis. So another year went by, and the things that were sort of distracting me, I started to push to the other side, because I had a bit of a dream. I wanted to go back to PNG and do something about it. So when I was 20, I went back up there to study my honours thesis. And Peter and I, we walked through the village for maybe 100 Ks. He's a lot fitter than me, so I was struggling to keep up. But we went around, and we found some things that I could never forget. So I ended up walking into a school one day in the Kuta Primary School. And this school was very similar to what our good friends at the Moneyborough State School, and pretty well everyone here in the room, what we all grew up with here in Townsville. The demountable classrooms, there was desks, there was chairs, pens, paper, books, bookshelves, blackboards, chalk and dust. But there was one big difference, something that I couldn't see throughout the whole room. There was no technology. And this was 2017, and there were no technology in the classroom. Now, can you imagine your educational journey without technology for just a moment? Can you imagine going without Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok for a day, let alone forever? And when I looked at that there, and this is very important, when I looked at that there, I could not accept that. I could not accept that those children were going through their learning journey without having access to the tools to learn, dream, and achieve in the digital world that we live in today. So I didn't accept it, and I did something about it. I donated my own personal laptop. I promised to come back with 12 more and build a computer lab. And at that time, it seemed like a ridiculous idea. And in fact, the two people that were there at the beginning, they had their doubts, of course they did. But you know what the most amazing thing was? Is that school, it wasn't unusual. It wasn't an aberration. I didn't suddenly just come to the one school that just didn't have any technology. In fact, of the 3,500 primary schools across Papua New Guinea, not a single one had a functional digital classroom. Not a single one. So you have 2 million primary school students going through Papua New Guinea. Not a single digital education. Now, I could not accept that. I still can't accept that. So I donated my own laptop. I promised to come back with 12 more. And I came home and I thought, well, I'm going to need some help to do this. So I formed a little group. And that little group was not impressive, crazy people with big CVs. It was people that had the most important attribute of innovation and change making. They didn't accept it either. And they were willing to help. And they were willing to put in the hard work to change that. And so over the next 5 years, we're actually celebrating our 5th anniversary on Saturday. And we've been able to help about 50,000 students get access to a digital learning experience. And so if you go to Papua New Guinea now and you drive around, 78 schools have a digital classroom. 78 schools. By the end of the year, when Peter finally goes back to Australia, his team are going to be cracking on in again and building a new digital classroom every 48 hours. We send shipping containers full of old devices, fix them up, and put them at the fingertips of this student here, who I'll get to in just a minute. Shipping containers. But when I first started, it was from one laptop. And we used to put them in suitcases to carry them up there. From suitcases to shipping containers in 5 years. So the first point I want to make today is that the big ideas that you're going to be brainstorming today and coming up with, they're going to seem a long way away. But let me just sort of, ruin the suspense for you. Life goes very, very, very bloody quickly. And it was only yesterday that I was sitting at one of those tables and actually sitting there listening to people like me and thinking, yeah, that's all cool, but how am I going to do that? The reality is that along this last 5 years, people, when they introduce me, they're always coming up with these reasons why I was able to do it. But they miss the point every time. I was just like you guys. I can name every single school uniform here. I grew up with kids like you. I played football at the Hermit Park Football Club. I went to the Townsville Grammar School. I walked the same halls as you guys did. And there was no difference between me and anybody else. It's just that when I had an opportunity to make a difference, I took it. And so that's the second message from today. Take every single opportunity that comes your way. This fella here, what you're looking at here is his first 15 minutes ever interacting with a digital world. Before my idea, he never had a chance. He never got to touch a computer. That is the first time he has ever touched a laptop. Who can remember the first time they touched a laptop? Yeah, you can? There you go. As you can see with this student, his eyes, that's what strikes me about this picture. What he's looking at is not a laptop. It's not a screen. What he's looking at is an opportunity. He's looking opportunity in the eye. And I can tell you, looking at his facial expression there, he's not wasting that opportunity. And he didn't. If you look just behind his head, you probably can't see there. I was about 4 students down. And I have the absolute pleasure of sitting with these kids the very first time they get to touch a digital device. And at the start, as you can imagine, like we all were when we were learning how to use a computer, we were hopeless. The kids were they could barely write their own name. They didn't know how to use the keys, and it was a struggle. So I was teaching sort of these kids up here using these devices, just trying to get them the basics, trying to get them to say, thank you, LiteHaus, or hello, Jack, or something like that. And I looked over, because Dad got my attention, actually, he was there that day too, and said, look at this. I looked over, and this particular student had written an entire paragraph using the shift key, using the space bar, showed me that he could use the backspace. He had bold text, italic text, everything that we just take for granted. Within 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Imagine what he can do in 15 years. But he would never have had that chance, nor would the other 50,000 students. That number becomes 250,000 by the end of the year. Those kids would never have had that opportunity if I had have just walked into that classroom and gone, oh, there's no technology here. Oh, well, not my problem, and move on. I didn't accept that day, and this is what happens. Before you know it, you're standing in front of an audience of people talking and sharing this idea. And so the third and most important thing today is that innovation comes with not accepting what is going on. Because acceptance is the enemy of innovation. If you accept something, well then, you're happy with how it is. Was I going to be happy that those kids would never have that moment? No. So I didn't accept it. So don't accept what's happening today. Don't accept that when we walk around and you're on the texters writing your idea down that there's a challenge in the way. Don't accept it. Don't stop at the red lights. And the reason for this is, I'm going to actually disagree with what I said before. This is the most important part. This is my final point. This is not an option. Innovation and being a change maker is not an option for us. All of us here today, I'm only about 8 years older than most of you here. We belong to a we belong to a generation of unparalleled opportunity, guys. We have the opportunity. We hold it in our hands. How many of you have a mobile phone in your pockets? Come on, everyone put their hand up. Gee, let's be real. Oh, it's in the bag. Sorry, yeah. Well, look, when you have lunch and all that, you'll hold in your hand an object that doesn't just do Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and all that rubbish. In your hand, you actually hold the greatest collection of human knowledge and ambition ever. And my dad, when he went to school, he didn't have that. Peter learned how to use a phone maybe 10 years ago, a laptop maybe 3 years ago. You are the privileged lot that have access to this. You have opportunity. And we are the generation of opportunity. But the most important point is that we're the generation of obligation. We've got problems in our world. We've got problems in our world. And the generation before us did a great job. But the job's not done. And the job will never be done. And so what you're doing today, you have to take responsibility for these problems. We all do. And whether you end up innovating and creating a big, big idea, I want to touch on a point that was made just before. It doesn't have to be a big idea. How's this for a big idea? Give more than you take. Not every single person here is going to be a founder and whatever else, or an entrepreneur. No. But what we can all do is be net positive people for this world. Give more than you take. Give more than you take. So today, take this opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity you have here to tap into some incredible minds at this incredible place. Don't accept what's going on. Always remember that big ideas seem a long way away until you get on that path. But above all, remember, this is not just an opportunity. You have an obligation to do good in this world. Your country needs you. Our world needs you. Our species needs you. And the future of all of us here relies on you. So good luck. Thank you.
All right, we're going to keep Jack on the hot seat for a second. Any questions? Anything that you want to know more about that might help you on your entrepreneurial journey right now? It's always somebody in the back row that has the first question. And it's okay because Kirstine's going to get her steps up by running down to the back, which is going to work really well. I almost feel like I should play elevator music. Doot, 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 doot. Excellent.
How did you initially fund the LiteHaus Corporation?
Cool, startup funding.
Yeah, no, very interesting. So I actually started with... I started with $20. So I had $20 from my best mate. And if you want the truth, if you want to skip through all of the platitudes and all that, I could go into plenty of detail, but it comes down to hard yakka. Are you willing to do it? Because if you're willing to do it, the red lights don't matter. You drive straight through those. It's the only time you're allowed to drive through red lights. So for me, I started off with $20. And then, of course, if one of my mates was giving it, well, then come on, get around. We went around, we tapped people on the shoulder, and then before you know it, we had $1,000. But then we found innovative ways of actually raising money, because at that stage, when it was just a little kid with an idea, no one was going to give me serious money. Of course not. I hadn't earned my stripes yet, hadn't delivered. So the first thing I had to do was to get runs on the board. And so we found ways to raise money. We actually went and recycled cans and bottles, 10 cents per cans and bottles. Luckily, we knew plenty of families that drank quite a bit, so that came in handy. But then also we recycled scrap steel, which is like, sort of old steel that'd be out in the bush or out the back of local businesses. And we took that and actually recycled that, and we'd get a couple of $100 here, a couple of $100 there. We'd sell meat trays and do raffles and things like that. And before you know it, we had enough money out there to actually deliver our first project. And this is a really good point, so I'm glad you asked that question. Once you've got results on the board, then everyone wants to know about you. Okay? So when we do this session later, be thinking about how I can get runs on the board for the very first time. Because once you got that on the board, then people will come along and support you. And so from that point, once we built our first computer lab, after that, then the momentum built. And suddenly there was a second one 3 months later. And then slowly but surely the intervals got smaller and smaller as more and more people heard about our work. And we always placed ourselves on what I call the line of opportunities. Being in this room here is an opportunity, guys. If you didn't come today, if you stayed at home and went to bed and just sort of didn't come to school today, you're not on the line of opportunities. How is anybody going to knock on your door and just give you an opportunity? No. You've got to be in the environment for opportunities and around people that can make great things happen. And you've got them here. They're your friends. I didn't get a big donation or a big, massive partnership. I mean, now we raise almost $1 million a year. There was no one wanting to give me that before. I started with my friends, my family, and the people around me. So these are your most important stakeholders when you've got a great idea. Do it together.
Awesome. All right, we have time for 2 more fast. Actually, we're going to do 3. Jack, your challenge is to answer the questions in 60 seconds or less.
Done.
All right, so we're going to do as many fast questions as we can. Who has, it's a step there, guys. Who has a question? Don't all jump at once. It gets super awkward when I have to fight you all back. Who's going to be brave? Yes. We got 2, 3 along the way. Excellent.
What's your proudest moment been while you've been creating the labs?
Great question. That's a really good question. Look, I must say, every single moment is a proud moment. I know that's a cliche, but it's true. But if I mean, that moment there was pretty special with that student, knowing that what I was doing was completely going to change the course of his life. But probably the most proud moment that I had is reflecting on a story that up in Ravenshoe State School, there was a student. So Ravenshoe's up in the Tablelands. Many of you might know. This particular student, he was like you guys. He was at top of his class, ducks of everything, on his way to being, hopefully on an amazing career path. But when you asked him what he wanted to do when he was older, he didn't have big dreams. He wasn't thinking big. So he was talking about, maybe I could have I could work down the bakery, or I could, work at the servo or something like that. He saw his career taking path in his little area, the only world he'd ever known. We donated a laptop to him, along with another 3,000 students across North Queensland. And from there, he actually Googled university on his device. He didn't know, and this is anyone from JCU marketing, pay attention to this. He didn't know that JCU was just down the road. And so now, long story short, he's now graduated his 3rd year in electrical engineering, and he's on his way to an incredible international career. So that was pretty proud for me to know that we had literally elevated his eyes and his horizons to believe and to think big. I was pretty proud about that.
Did you face any failures or dead ends when you were doing this project?
That's a good question, but there's never any dead ends, ever. There's never any red lights. And I never forget talking to someone from Papua New Guinea, and they said to me, they read an article that I'd been interviewed in, and they said, thank you for not stopping at the red lights. Because if you do that, well, then there's no good. If you do that, you're just accepting it. You're just giving up. But look, there is challenges along the way, but it just comes down to persistence, and it comes down to being realistic. I think a lot of people fail on this journey when they start a little idea, and then they think it's the most important idea in the world. My idea is just another one of many challenges that's being solved around the world. It's not special. It's just another thing. So I couldn't expect people to suddenly come in and just see what was in my brain and just fund me, give me tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I had to accept that it was a journey. And I think the reason why, because I do get this question quite often, I don't really have an answer for it because I didn't see those as red flags or red lights or anything like that. It was just part of the journey. We just had to keep going, but we were always very grounded in where we were. We knew that for the first 3 or 4 years, we would have to recycle scrap steel, that we weren't going to have people coming forward and giving us big donations. So we had to be realistic about the whole journey, and we still are today. Let me tell you, there's still plenty of funding bodies that I would love to get behind me that, for whatever reason, are not. So don't see those red lights as dead ends. If you do that, you're letting yourself down and everybody else as well with your idea. So don't stop.
Last question.
Oh, that was his question as well.
Can I just make one last point? Probably something I didn't touch on in my speech is that everybody here, hands up who wants to travel the world when they do their job. You want to go around the world and do cool things. That's most of us. I was like that too, right? But I grew up in Townsville. How on earth could I do a global career without moving away? I've never lived anywhere else other than Townsville, a little bit in India, but other than that, always in Townsville. And so one thing I want to leave with you today is that regional Australians like you, we're no different to the kids down south. We're no different at all. And this university is just as good as the ones down there. It's about how you take those opportunities, okay? Because I don't know anybody from UQ, I don't know anybody from Sydney University doing what I'm doing, okay? So you can do it right here. And 85,000 graduates of JCU have done it just here. Next 2 weeks' time, I'm off to the UK. After that, I'm off to the Philippines. After that, I'm off to PNG. So I have a wonderful life traveling the world doing this work, but I still live in Railway Estate. So don't ever think that you have to leave this city. Stay here and help us grow this city to be more incredible.